Every now and then, characters come into a story that don't always manage to grab the limelight amidst everything going on around them. Their presence goes either unnoticed or unappreciated due to them not really being a source of focus. But regardless of whether or not the proper attention is truly given to these characters, it can, on occasion, create a diamond in the rough. Something that, whether intentional or not, managed to become something truly special. And for me, that's exactly what the Aesops were. When I bring up the fact that they are some of my favorite characters in recent history, people are baffled. They don't understand how this group of characters could possibly outshine these others that are clearly being pushed through more prominent character arcs. But I believe this group is the most severely underrated addition added during the Atlas arc in the whole of RWBY. I'd go so far as to say they might be the best side characters we've ever gotten. But why? How can this group of soldiers who've managed to feel like they've gotten limited screen time and more often than not shafted in the story be one of my favorite additions to the universe as a whole? The Aesops were a brand new group of characters introduced towards the beginning of Volume 7. These were Atlas's best huntsmen, the highest, most skilled students to come from this kingdom's academy, edging out the likes of Team Funky, Ciel, and yeah, those are the only huntsmen. This team was highly coordinated and the gold standard for what teamwork should accomplish with the right training and discipline. But right from the beginning, it was made clear that they held a special relationship with each other that was unlike that of any characters we'd met so far. This group weren't friends. They got along well enough and had playful banter, but at the end of the day, they each saw each other as nothing more than teammates. And this is the best of Atlas's huntsmen we're talking about here, not some random team. This group has managed to become the best the kingdom has to offer with this attitude. But with this setup, you knew this was something that was supposed to and would develop further down the line. Their collective flaw was something shared between all of them, and it was a point that they were to grow from. As the story played out, the true emotions of everyone would be exposed to the light. The fact that they do care about each other, however, are simply lying to themselves about their emotions to make the grievance of loss more bearable. It's a beautifully sad aspect of these characters as you get to see how lying about their emotions has affected them in different ways. Without being able to express grief or sadness, it's led some, like Harriet, to convert that into anger. The Aesops treat caring almost as a selfish act. By making others care about you, when death inevitably comes, it's gonna destroy them. Knowing that these characters are simply lying to themselves about their emotions to cope with the lifestyle they're in made them so intriguing to watch. And seeing that arc from teammates to friends was a valuable lesson everyone from a spectator perspective knows, but it was a journey you got to see them grow into. In contrast to Team RWBY, there are no lessons learned from the Aesops. The idea of being too overly attached to their friends never comes with any form of negative consequence. In fact, it's not a concept that's even considered. Team RWBY enters the story with one outlook and ends it with the exact same. And it becomes really hard for me to attach myself to characters that have no real flaws and nowhere to grow in a meaningful sense. Being uncertain doesn't really matter if the uncertainty always saves the day. But the Aesops aren't perfect, in a good way. The Aesops are loyal and follow orders, but they do so too much. The concept of Ironwood turning maniacally evil, feel about that as you may, opened the floodgates for a genuine story following the Aesops themselves. A group of characters whose entire existence gets flipped on its head. Everything they've known, everything that they've been trained to do, everything that's led them correctly so far. What happens when that's lost? They lose Clover, their leader. They're without direction from the inside, so they take it from Ironwood himself, but Ironwood's methods have become extreme and questionable. So their journey becomes just how far can they be pushed before their morality comes into play, before the orders they're given. But you see, the reason I drew comparisons between them and Team RWBY is because they are parallels to each other. The Aesops are a mirror reflection of the group in both powers and personalities. But to draw more parallels to Team RWBY, I must go through each of the characters.
Never really had a problem with you.
Clover's a member I consider to be a bit unique to the Aesops, because while everyone has their opposite, Clover is a direct opposite to Crow, and much like Crow, I don't really consider him as a teammate but more a leader. Clover is the leader, but he's also a member of the group, whereas Crow is more passively watching from the outside. So in reality, I don't have much to say about Clover other than the fact that they needed way more screen time with him because his importance to both Crow and Harriet was not given any proper time to establish. Clover was such a huge motivating factor for these two characters, and he never became much else other than a nice, personable guy who did his job as part of the military. He seems pretty cookie cutter, and it's hard to say if he really was. Miro gets a lot of credit for being the best of the Aesops, but I think that largely comes from the fact that he's most like the main characters and he's a dog. But in reality, Miro actually fits his role very well as part of the group because he's the rookie. He's the newest member of the group, however long ago that may have been, but that also means he's the most likely to defect. The concept of following orders no matter what when it comes to very drastic decisions is one he's not accustomed to, so he's most likely to call it into question. And that's exactly what happens. Miro's the biggest defector of the group, and when ordered to do something, he's the first one to be hesitant to do said order. He comes off as the more rational one as he's one of the only characters willing to use his emotions throughout the volumes. The others have been part of the team for so long that they've grown used to following orders, and that's it. Because up until this point in time, following orders has never been the wrong thing to do. Being the rookie came in great convenience here because it made him less subservient. He winds up being more of Weiss's double, but in reality that's a loose comparison. The both of them don't have too much in common other than the fact that they both have had a generally decent character progression that doesn't really taper downwards. They're both well liked respectively because not much reason has been given to go against that. I really wish I had more to say about Elm though. Of all the Aesops, she definitely had the least amount of time to shine and do anything in the story whatsoever. Even towards the end, she never quite tried to snap everyone to their senses and wound up just being there. She's kinda paralleled by Yang because Elm too has a temper, kind of, but that trait was kinda thrown in last moment and she doesn't really lose her temper that often. I think one of the key moments they could have had her really shine would have been when Ironwood almost shot Miro. Considering how she just stands there most of the time, I think she should have at least been the one to have punched him and saved his life. At that point, she contributes and then Winter takes him away, recognizing what Elm just did. But in reality, I think that would have just killed him. Miro has a better chance of surviving Ironwood's handgun to the back of the head than Elm's cannon to the jaw. But yeah, while I like Elm a lot as she's simple-minded and strong, she was the most underutilized Aesop of the bunch. Vine wound up with quite his moment to shine towards the end. He's most paralleled by Blake, but unlike Blake, Vine has this consistent aspect about him. He's a very calm and reserved individual. He'll often think logically instead of emotionally, more so than any of the other Aesops. That's not to say Blake should act in the same way as him, no, but through Vine's methods, he's often the peace broker of the group. He comes off as the least antagonistic of everyone and will usually resort in attempting to solve their problems with words instead of actions first. Non-violence seems to always be his first strategy, and that's the main comparison and subsequent difference I see between him and Blake. Because Blake went through this entire arc with the White Fang with the end result being peace. Adam's methods of using violence was not what they would stand for, so they were going to go back to a more diplomatic approach. Yet despite that, Blake has yet to exhibit any of those qualities learned. When her father too would even try to resolve a situation by talking even when under direct gunfire, Blake resorts to violence almost always as her first act. In Volume 8, Chapter 3, Strings, the Aesops intercept the characters under the attempt of capturing Penny. When all of the characters come face to face, you'll notice the distinct difference in how both sides carry themselves. The main group of characters draw their weapons at first sight before any words had even been exchanged. The mere presence of them has them ready to attack. Whereas the Aesops don't do anything. They don't ready their fighting stance, they don't try to sneak attack them, they instead confront Penny directly. Vine goes off per usual as the ambassador, trying to resolve the situation peacefully. You'd expect Blake to use her past experiences dealing with the White Fang and to try peace talks, and once that fails, then you can fight. But that never really happens. The characteristics that define and separate how each person acts in what given scenario is all the same with Team RWBY, whereas the Aesops have their roles and they remain consistent in how they go about it. By the end of the volume, when Harriet's about to use the bomb on Mantle, it was Vine who took immediate action to confront Harriet peacefully as he always does. And best of all, it's the most peaceful he's ever come across, because when trying to broker peace with someone you don't quite know, it's harder to find common ground and an understanding. But Vine knows Harriet, so the chemistry comes off as genuine because he understands her better than everyone else. That's the dynamic of the group I was talking about. Despite their flaw having been, we're not friends, by having this conversation and this interaction showing just how real they can be with each other, that's all we need. I think Vine wound up being a bit of a hidden gem, especially towards the end when he did get a little time to shine. But undeniably, the best of the Aesops is Harriet. Harriet single-handedly encompasses an entire journey to herself with all of the character traits of a main character. Harking back to a previous point about flaws, Harriet has a genuine flaw. A flaw which actively services her and the story as a whole. Looking at the other four main girls, their flaws are largely non-existent to the point of actually affecting them or the plot. Ruby's supposed flaws may be that she's too young and doesn't know how to lead, but that flaw never actually leads to something that is actively fighting against her in the story. Despite not being a good leader, she takes down Atlas's military, acquires the Staff of Creation, and evacuates Mantle and Atlas, minimizing casualties by insane numbers. Ruby's flaws never feel like genuine flaws. The closest character you can argue as to actually having a flaw is Yang. The show has touched upon her anger on several occasions, however, despite that, she's only ever actually paid for it a single time. Adam cutting off her arm is the only time her anger resulted in consequences. After that, she's still continued to be short-tempered, getting into fights on the regular with a bad attitude to accompany it. Despite her anger issues, no one ever seems to mind Yang for them, as she's still well-liked by every single person she comes into contact with. You see, the main character's flaws never quite feel like flaws to begin with. They never negatively affect them or the story. But Harriet is the exact opposite. Her flaw is both her greatest strength and also her greatest weakness: loyalty. Harriet is an incredibly loyal individual, which has by proxy made her an amazing soldier, being one of the best huntsmen to come out of Atlas. She gets the job done, and you can always count on her to follow through on her mission. Gathering intel, clearing out Grimm, defending a city, Harriet will gladly put her life on the line for whatever order she's given. But it's exactly that character trait which puts her almost nuking a city. When pointed in the right direction, Harriet can accomplish amazing things, and it has always served her right. But what happens when the person giving the orders becomes wrong? Harriet has spent presumably her entire life and career following the orders of others to become one of the best soldiers to exist. But in the process, she lost her own free will. Decision-making isn't what she does. What Harriet does is follow orders. This is a genuine character flaw which makes her such a great character to watch. And this by proxy goes the same for the other Aesops as well, however not to the extent of Harriet, which is what puts her as a higher rank than the others. I like to think that her personality is also a reflection of this. I'd compare it similarly to Penny. A lack of true social engagement has created a personality that doesn't quite fit in with the normalcy of everyone else. But in Penny's case, she was more awkward and quirky, while Harriet's more brash and assertive. And I like to think that's because that too came at a trade-off of being a truly high soldier. She dedicated herself so much to the practice and discipline that she lost the other parts that would make her seem like a normal person. But it's kind of countered by the times that she is actually pretty nice and warm.
Man, I did not sign up to be a babysitter.
Yeah, well, the rest of us babysit you all the time.
But no matter what, it always seems she defaults to a more authoritative mother figure type.
Don't wander off, don't break anything, and be ready in case the general calls on you.
But back to her flaws. It's precisely these reasons that her journey along with the others was a true hidden gem throughout the arc, which didn't get the attention and love it deserved. Harriet was the toughest nut to crack. She was the most loyal, and it took the sacrifice of a friend to make her realize that they are, indeed, friends. Admittedly, I think Vine's death was largely unnecessary because the city was empty, so if the bomb did go off, no one would die. Or he could have held the bomb from the outside. But you could still see it as the final step and consequence of Harriet's loyalty. It is her own fault things got so far, so Vine's death signifies both an end and beginning. The end of her servitude, but the beginning of her free will. Harriet is often looked at negatively for her attitude and loyalty to Ironwood, but that's what a flaw should be. A flaw should be annoying, something you know is actively wrong with a character, and something that leads to negative consequences for them or others around them. And it is the journey of whether or not that character will grow and learn from said flaw that will ultimately save them or be their demise. When people say the Aesops didn't do anything, they're kinda wrong, but it's hard to blame them. Their storyline was shoved into the deepest corners of the background with no proper air to breathe for themselves. They never quite got the time to shine, which is a real shame because hidden amongst all of the chaos and war going on, there was a genuinely compelling story occurring within the hearts of these soldiers. But what also wound up hampering this group in the long run as well was that Winter was pretty much given the exact same story, recognizing the authority above her has become hostile and deciding a path for herself. The series focused much more on her dealing with this that it left the Aesops in its shadow, which is really unfortunate because she did really steal their spotlight. After Clover's death, Winter was placed in charge of the Aesops, but Winter doesn't hold any sort of dynamic with them. She's the stranger of the group and it feels that way, but she was the stranger that the series wanted to focus on. In fact, I didn't even know she was supposed to be leading the team until near the end of the volume. Winter was given the exact same storyline as them, placed into their group, but was the only one to walk away with that focus. It's no wonder the Aesops feel like they didn't get the limelight because Winter took it all. The progression of Winter's character didn't in turn translate to the progression of everyone else. When Harriet develops or Vine or Elm, it collectively feels like they as a team have become stronger. Even when Miro defected, it felt like they became weaker as a unit because Miro feels a part of the team. But when Winter defects, it's just Winter defecting. She doesn't care about them and they don't care about her. The Aesops collectively work as a team, but Winter came in individually and developed individually. It's not Winter's fault, but the writers kinda just gave everyone with ties to Ironwood the exact same story. The Aesops truly held all of the qualities needed as a main cast, their decisions, their actions, what they go through, and the lessons needed to be learnt. They were the only group who had fought to defend Mantle and fought to defend Atlas. The main characters sit there drinking tea doing what exactly? Defending Penny, defending Nora, but Ironwood doesn't know where they are, and they killed the Hound, which can't report back to Salem, so no one knows where they are. The Aesops are active players in the story. They're the ones on the front lines. They're the ones who go through a struggle where their whole philosophy about how they carry out their lives is uprooted and put into question. And all this isn't even mentioning another aspect about them which I think has gone so overlooked, which is their design. A recent problem I've had with RWBY ever since it switched to Maya was that all of the characters as models all looked the same. More or less they were sized up or shrunk down with about 2 to 3 separate base models which didn't vary too much. But the Aesops, these are the first characters we've seen look like this. Elm is the only female character who's this size with these muscles, or just muscles in general for a female model. Vine is so much lankier and skinnier than everyone else. Something I think that has sort of become lost to the design is being able to tell who they are based on simply how they look. And the Aesops are incredibly diverse in their stature, which makes them stand out above the rest we've seen. I think it's a very underappreciated aspect about their group as a whole. When I say the Aesops were a genuine diamond in the rough throughout Atlas's arc and the entirety of RWBY's story, I'm not joking. They possess all of the qualities of main characters, but ironically are treated more like main characters due to not actually being them. They have flaws, their actions have consequences, and by the end of the arc, they have taken away a valuable lesson that will change the course for their future. But even despite being antagonized throughout all of Volume 8 and the end of Volume 7, you'll notice the Aesops never actually act like bad guys. Their actions place them against Team RWBY and the other characters, which in this show automatically is a near-death sentence. But when being faced with them, their solution is often simple arrest. Their attempts are always to get the characters into custody, not kill them. During their fight in Volume 7, Harriet could easily slam RWBY's head into the concrete and knock her out, but instead she tries to simply apprehend her. But this action is only rewarded by the others doing the exact opposite and treating her like trash. It's such a petty thing to see RWBY do this and act like a child because Harriet dared try to fight her, but still gets away with it for being quirky. The lack of care and respect given to her opponent during actions like this is what makes the main characters, especially RWBY in this scenario, come off as a petty child. The Aesop story didn't get the amount of screen time they genuinely deserved. They're a group of characters who went through an honest-to-God arc. Despite their flaws of not seeing each other as teammates, at the end of the day, they did what only the most true of friends can do. Being there not when it's convenient, but when it's needed. No matter how far someone's flaws wind up pushing them into their darkest moments, it is only their true friends who will be there to stand by their side and attempt to guide them in the right direction.